to know the mind of God and exactly, we know so little about space. We know basically 4% about space. I mean, you can imagine if somebody were to come up and your son was to come up and say, hey, Dad, I want to learn about, building automobiles. And you turn around and you say, okay, son, I'm going to put you in touch with somebody that he knows 4% about building automobiles. And you're going to go, that's who I want to teach you. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah.
But we turn around and we look at space, that's what we know. And so to know the mind of God and why he made it that big, it may be that there's all a dance going on and it all needs to be there.
Yeah.
That if without a piece of it there, that maybe the dance stops.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creation.Live. In each episode of this show, ICR scientists gather with subject matter experts, apologists, and other special guests to discuss pressing issues, whether that be ICR's current research, something new that's come to light in the scientific community, or something else entirely that ultimately impacts how science points to our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ. We hope that these conversations are encouraging and enlightening in an increasingly chaotic world. I have with me today ICR physicist, Dr. Jake Hebert. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And for our special guests today, I have Perry Holifield.
Correct.
And James Worrell.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. And Perry and James are from Day 4 Astronomy. We have done an episode about Day 4 Astronomy earlier. We'll link to that. So if you want to know a more in-depth dive into their mission and what they do, then give that episode a watch. But for now, thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. So Day 4 is, of course, an astronomy ministry. We'll give some of the viewers, just that very briefest glimpse. So an astronomy ministry that focuses on, creation science and how astronomy can be used in apologetics and evangelism, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll start with you, Perry, because you are closest to me.
Okay.
What is your story? How did you come to be involved with Day 4? And go.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't have a lot to do with astronomy, and I didn't have a lot of interest in it whenever we first started out. But I had a Bible study. We have a program we have at our church called Friend Speak. And there's a lot of UTD students that are Taiwanese and Chinese, and they all want to speak English and more just like we speak English, all the different phrases and things. So we have a couple of books. Every year we do a book at John, Mark, or whatever, and we do it in very good, easy English. And then we sit down, we form relationships with them. So I had a lady by the name of Lillian, and she came over, we met. You become so close to them that you become almost like, she calls me her American dad. She calls my mom her American mother, my sister, my daughters her American sisters. And while we were talking, I asked her in the first couple of weeks, I just said, what is it that you guys believe in Taiwan? Because I know it's not typically a Christian. I know there's some Christian churches there and things like that. She said that it's more of a universalist type thing. There's a lot of different religions, Buddhism and that sort of stuff, and they know that all of them have a couple of good things about it. So they kind of just cherry pick what's good, and they try to live their lives that way. And she asked me, she said, how do you know that the Bible is, actually real in the Word of God? And I said, well, there's a lot of, because I knew she was into the sciences and stuff. I said, there's a lot of things that are in the Bible, a lot of scriptures that are in the Bible that have been proven scientifically accurate, even though they're not said in a scientific way. It's statements that are made. God makes the lightning for the rain. Turns out, son of a gun, if it didn't, that every time there's a lightning strike, rain increases, right? I mean, there's different words like that and different verses like that. And she said, well, can you show me that? And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. Why don't we have a Bible study like that? Well, 2 years later, we're still doing Friend Speak, and I still haven't started that. And she kept asking me about every 3 months, will you do that? Or when are you going to do that Bible study? And we kind of made a joke out of it. And then she moved to Taiwan. And after she moved to Taiwan, she called me back one day and she said, I want to continue the Bible studies, but when are you going to do that Bible study with me? I said, I'll start it now. So we started doing it, and about a good 150 pages later of emails going back and forth, she was sending my emails over to a doctor in Virginia that she ended up ultimately marrying, and he wanted to see them all. And basically, I took the scriptures that were scientifically, connected, and we went over those scriptures. And I called Parker one day, and I said, "Hey, Parker, I've got all this apologetic stuff. Again, had nothing to do with astronomy at all. It was just everything. I said, I've got all these scriptures and things I'd like to, would you like to get together, create a Bible class? I can give it to your church. You can come to my church. And he said, well, son of a gun, it's kind of funny that you called me today. I was literally approached by ICR yesterday, and they want us to come do an astronomy meeting at their place. He said, we don't have anybody to do apologetics. Do you want to do apologetics? I thought, well, that sounds kind of fun. Yeah, that's how I did it. And that's how I got involved. And the astronomy interest in the space and astronomy, it came from being a part of the group, from being that. So I'd never really looked up the stars. We went to Colorado one day to check out if it's a place to do a night. I'm probably going over way too much stuff.
You're good.
But we went up there and it was a friend of ours that has 2,500 acres up there, and he wanted us to come out and check out to see if there's a place we could do a weekend Star Watch party. Yeah. And we went up there, and James's prayer was so unbelievable. I've said, I wish I had that recorded, because he was in awe. And I'm like, man, this guy's in awe. He sees this stuff. And I'm looking up, and you see the Milky Way from horizon to horizon like I've never seen it. I was like, my word, it is awesome. And that's kind of when I started getting my interest into it, and we kind of goes from there.
Awesome. Well, James, hard to follow that up, right? I want to hear this.
It's always hard to follow up with prayer.
I want to hear that prayer. Can you say it? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So you're involved with Day 4. Can you tell us how you got involved with them?
Sure. So I've been a lover of sciences all my life. Even as a child, I remember early on, you could write a letter to NASA, whether it's in Houston or in Florida. You could write a letter and they would respond back to you with photographs, a sticker or something like that. And that's really what gained my interest in space. But however, I ended up going to college to get my degree in geology. So it's not really space related.
That's like the opposite,
It's
right?
the opposite. Yeah, it's earth based, yes. Right? And so, I was raised in a church, a Christian home. However, being raised in a secular school and in college that taught the evolutionary worldview as truth, I had to come to find some conclusion. How do I accept the Bible and accept what the scientists are saying is valid? So at that point, I accepted theistic evolution in any other type of old earth belief system, and I took that on. So I remember many times I would have arguments with my mom. My mom is not college educated, and she would always point me, but the Bible says, but God says, and I would just get angry at that. But I would say, scientists say, but science says, right? And it wasn't until a few years, some years after I got married, that I read a book by Ray Comfort. And that book is called Hell's Best Kept Secret. And I realized then I have been living a lie all my life. I've been going to church. Yeah, I read my Bible and new stuff. But I never once could point to a time where I really repented and turned from my sins and come to faith. And I am telling you, when I did that, it was like a light came on. No longer was millions and billions of years even an option. It was as foreign to me as a foreign language. And now all of a sudden the Bible became alive, and the verses that dealt in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I mean, right there, he tells you that he spoke, all these things into existence. And right then I said, man, this is true. This is the truth. And so I had gotten a telescope, a small telescope my father had bought for me. And one time, one of my sons was having a birthday party, and we brought the telescope out to look at Orion Nebula. And so I pulled that out, got it out, and the kids were just enamored by looking at Orion Nebula through a small 4-inch telescope. And it just blew my mind. And the parents, when they'd come pick up their kids, they would come look. And there was such joy and then like, wow, look what God has done and all this stuff. So that's when, I thought, man, I really need to get a real telescope, because the telescope I had then really wasn't that. It was shaky and rickety. So I'd gotten a true telescope. My mom gotten it for my birthday, and it's a 10-inch Dobsonian. So it means that it's about that big around, so 10-inch. And man, it can take in more light and see more things. So the place I purchased it from ended up having a night where they teach you how to use it. So I took that and two of my boys, we went to this park and set up where the store was setting up other classes. And there was a gentleman just next door to us that was setting up his telescope. And he had all this technology equipment connected to it and iPads and, it was moving on its own and he could just point and do stuff. And so I'm trying to finagle this, move to where everything is just pushing, this way. And so I said, hey, why don't y'all go check out his stuff? Come to find out, he was a believer, a Christian. And so we started talking, and he started talking about, where do you go to church? Oh, I go to Prestonwood Baptist Church. Oh, so do I. I go to Prestonwood Baptist Church. This is where we go, And so we started talking about that. We started talking about, well, God had always given me a vision of having an astronomy club, astronomy group, people to do astronomy together with the Christian point of view, the biblical worldview. Because everywhere in Dallas-Fort Worth, there are star parties, all from a secular worldview. And people are always telling us all they hear is evolution, all they hear is Christian bashing. So we wanted to be an alternative to that. So I said, that's exactly how I felt that God was leading to get this telescope to start doing something of that nature. And that's how we got started in this, day 4.
Awesome.
You never told him it was actually Parker that we were dealing with.
Yeah, that was
Well, yeah. I was going to say with the iPad. And for anyone who wants the other side of that story, you can listen to the other Day 4 podcast. And because Parker did mention meeting you there at that star watching thing, learning to use your telescope.
It was a divine appointment, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much for the introductions. Today, we're going to talk about space, believe it or not, your favorite subject for right now. And we're going to talk about how big it is. So I don't think that our viewers, I know that I don't, we just, during the homeschool days, I watched the live stream of you give a presentation on just kind of how big space was. And it was mind-blowing. Those numbers aren't even real to me.
Right.
So let's talk about how big space is. We've sent out the James Webb Telescope so we can see more of it. Anybody want to throw out a number? How big is the universe?
It's really big.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, yeah.
Yeah. We're talking, tens of billions of light years across at least. Yeah, I mean, it's huge.
Do we have like a time frame of how long it would take to cross that?
Well, let's see here.
Quick math.
Well, in theory, yeah. If it's the number I hear, and I may be misremembering this, but I want to say the estimated radius of the visible universe is like 47 billion light years.
Okay.
So presumably, if you're traveling with the speed of light, it would take that long to go from one end to the other.
Okay.
Of course, that gets into this issue of like distant starlight. Well,
right.
We can talk about that another time.
Hey, if you want to know about distant starlight, we did a podcast on it.
Right.
I'll link to that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's huge. It's just so big you can't even comprehend it. It's
Our answers are going to be a whole lot more simpler than the physicists.
Right. No, okay. So we know that it's big. Yeah. We know that we can just look up in the night sky and see that it's big. And now that we have the technology, we can see that it's even bigger than we thought. Right. So I guess really my question is, why? As creationists, why is the universe so huge? Why did God make all of this? Now, I'm not saying that we're going to speak for God, but why, to the best of your understanding, why do you think that there is so much out there for us to explore?
I think there's different answers by people that are educated, like Dr. Hebert, and then there's us that are basically living it, that learn about it as we go. But to know the mind of God and we know so little about space. We know basically 4% about space. I mean, you can imagine if somebody were to come up and your son was to come up and say, hey, Dad, I want to learn about, building automobiles. And you turn around and you say, okay, son, I'm going to put you in touch with somebody that he knows 4% about building automobiles. And you're going to go, that's who I want to teach you. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah.
But we turn around and we look at space. That's what we know. And so to know the mind of God and why he made it that big, it may be that there's all a dance going on and it all needs to be there.
Yeah.
That if without a piece of it there, that maybe the dance stops, right? So to be able to know why it's that large, I don't know. I mean, Dr. Hebert probably may know more than we do, but as the person that's uneducated, that doesn't have, all the degrees and things like that behind actually studying that. I mean, it may just be as simple as God just needs it.
Yeah.
And he made it that way.
And that's what science is, right? Psalms 111:2 says, "Great are the works of the Lord. They are studied by all who delight in them." I mean, that is science right there. It's a scientific thought right there, that we do science because we are studying what God has created, getting more insight into maybe the mechanics of the items he's created, or the colors, the light, how light works, and, all of these different things. We are investigating, we're studying, we delight in his works. And when we look up to the heavens, and that's what people have forgotten to do, we don't look up anymore. We're so involved in our iPads, our devices, and what's right here that we're failing to see what the ancients saw was what's in the heavens, right? And so it can't help but when you look up, like we were in Colorado that time, you look up, I couldn't help but I turned into worship. It's when you're a believer and you're able to see it for all of God's glory, his wonderful works, unfathomable, the scripture said today, right? Then that is one of his purposes, is for his joy and also for us to learn a thing, learn to continue to grow. If he just stopped it right there, what are we going to claim? We know everything? But throughout generations and generations, we're able to gain knowledge, and that knowledge is increased because he has put it out there for us to continue to grow.
Yeah, for some reason, a lot of atheists and skeptics seem to think that the size of the universe is an argument against Christianity. And their reasoning seems to go something like, well, we're on this little bitty planet, and if we're the center of God's attention, which the scripture, I think, teaches, there's no reason for the universe to be this big. But I don't think that's right. For one thing, we get a feel for just how great and awesome God is when you look at that grandeur and that immense scale. I mean, the fact that, the Bible talks about him measuring the heavens with this, his hand, with the span of his hand, and yet it's this immense volume that we can't even conceive. You get an idea of how great he is, and also, this is speculation on my part. It's reverent speculation, but I do believe that when Jesus comes back, he's going to let us explore outer space. And I think it's going to be wonderful. I think it's going to be a blast. And, if God is glorified, when we can see these celestial wonders up from a distance, okay, through a glass darkly, as it were, how much more would he be glorified if we got to see it up close? And I think about it, if you think to be able to see those wonders up close, that's an astronomer or astronaut's dream come true. And yet many of these people, if you think about it, the only person who has the power to make that dream come true is the Lord. The idea that we're going to get in these spaceships and travel the cosmos, they make it look easy on Star Trek, but it's not easy. It's not. In fact, it's probably impossible. But God, he is capable of doing that. And it's very sad to me that so many evolutionists who would admittedly love to explore the cosmos don't even, they won't even consider the possibility that maybe God really did make it. And if the Bible's true and he has a resurrection plan for us, where we're going to be raised to this more glorious state, I don't think it's far-fetched to think at all that he would allow us to explore the rest of the cosmos. The Bible makes it clear he's already given us his son. How much more will he give us all things? So I don't think that argument is really a good argument they make. And I think in a Christian worldview, there are reasons that God might very well make the universe so big. Just to put it succinctly, I think God's children are going to need a big playground to play on.
I think most of the people are try to perceive things based on what the human perception is. Mm-hmm. And there's got to be a reason, but it's got to be something that they can physically grasp and hold, get their minds around. And that's what we try to do with God. And we're going to do that with the universe as well. To make the statement that why does it have to be that big, because we're this little planet over here, that's just kind of silliness to even think that there's not a reason for something to be that large. I mean, you just go out into the planets that are around in our own solar system. There's a reason for every one of them for our life. Right here. Well, why would you think that it wouldn't expand out past that? But it makes it easy to grasp it with our own mind, because our own intellect, because that's where we put God. We try to confine God into our own mind.
Yeah. Try to put him in a little box. And yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about size then. The Earth. In reference to, we'll even just say the sun, how big is the Earth? Like times wise?
Well, the Earth is about 7,100, 7,200 miles wide.
Okay.
So that would be 15,000 miles circumference, So, and then you think about the moon. The moon is about, we always show kids, we bring that 7,000 mile Earth down to the size of a basketball.
Okay.
And then we take a tennis ball, which is roughly a quarter, and we show that that's basically what the moon is, a quarter of the size of the Earth. And if the moon could land on the Earth, it would be roughly the size of the North America, United States area. So we always take kids because they can't grasp the distance, the 180-something thousand miles that are in between the two. If we shrunk down the Earth and the moon into these objects, how far would they be? And kids will always hold out like this. I'll hold the Earth, the basketball, and they'll hold the moon, and they'll go about 5-6 feet away. And we have to keep moving them further away. And it's roughly around 20, 24 feet away, just in that little scale. Mm-hmm. So that tells you when you blow things up, it's much bigger. For example, we have a sun ball that looks like the sun. It's roughly 40 inches, right? The Earth would be the size of a blueberry, a small blueberry, and it would be about 380 feet away.
It kind of puts it into perspective, because now even thinking like, I know that our sun, it is unique, but it's not particularly large either compared to other stars. As far as other stars go, how does it compare size-wise?
Well, Betelgeuse is about 700 times larger than our sun. That would be like if we took our sun, that 40-inch ball of the sun, Betelgeuse would be about 1,500 feet.
Mind blowing. Yeah.
And that's not even the largest star. There's much larger than the stars. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So for our listeners and viewers, now you know, hey, this planet is very small, and there's a lot out there. And I mean, I think we've all kind of, said that this is for God's glory. There might be some practical purpose. You said for our solar system and for beyond, the dance where if you remove any piece, things fall apart. From my perspective, I'm just thinking like, hey, that's all for God's glory. What other purpose is there for anything?
God literally says in Scripture that He made it for Himself.
Yeah.
So he's getting enjoyment out of watching the universe, out there floating around. He likes it.
Yeah. And I can't even wrap my mind around that.
Yeah.
If He enjoys it, that's even boggles my mind that He enjoys His creation.
What surprises me is that verse is in there that says God made it for Himself. Yet if I'm a believer in evolution, I believe that God, who made it for Himself, decided to wait about 20 billion years for it all to come about just so He could enjoy it. I mean, that's just, that itself is silly. Who would do that?
Yeah.
So God just spoke it into existence, and all of a sudden He's enjoying it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're finding through the James Webb Space Telescope. They're finding these objects fully formed, as if that time's not there. That it didn't really take that long. And as they keep finding this evidence that show the universe to be young.
Yeah. Let me dig a little deeper there, and Dr. Hebert, you may need to hop in on this. So when you're saying that, because of how light works and how far away these things are that we're seeing with the James Webb Telescope, these things are already made where scientists are saying they shouldn't be formed if we're still seeing them, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How far away are these things that we're seeing with the James Webb Space Telescope? I know there was the Hubble before that. How much? Well, we'll say how much are we actually seeing with the James Webb Space Telescope? How much of the universe do we know?
Well, we're seeing, they often talk about redshift, and redshift is sort of it's a measure of distance in a way. But, you're getting up to very high redshifts when you're looking at some of these objects. And, boy, I don't know if I can give you a distance off the top of my head. But I mean, obviously the more powerful the telescope, the farther out you're looking.
Okay.
And, the reason that evolutionists are so surprised by this is because, remember, they're assuming that it takes distant light billions of years to get here.
Right.
They're assuming that. And so if you're looking at stuff that is farther away, they think you're looking backwards many billions of years in time. So they think that when you see these very, very distant galaxies, you're looking back to a time very shortly after the alleged Big Bang.
Okay.
Which means that we should not be seeing those galaxies as they are now, but as they were maybe just a few 100 million years after the alleged Big Bang. The problem for them is it takes a long time for galaxies to form. Remember, they think galaxies form and evolve slowly. So they have an issue. Is there enough time for you to have these fully formed galaxies that early in the universe? And of course, as creationists, we don't think we're looking back billions of years.
Right.
Okay. But that's why for them it is a problem, because it's a question of, is there enough time for these galaxies to form? In fact, I saw just the other day, there was a website that was by a group or ministry that holds to the Big Bang, that endorses the Big Bang. Okay. They're Christians, but they endorse the Big Bang. And they were saying, well, this isn't really a problem because star formation was just more efficient right after the Big Bang. Well, that's like saying more stars formed because more stars formed. I mean, that doesn't tell you anything, right? That's not an explanation. And the evolutionists know it's not.
Okay.
And so that's why the James Webb Telescope has been such a problem for them.
Okay.
Well, and what's even more fun is when they come up with new theories or new explanations for something that they believed. And it's just like Dr. Hebert was saying, there are not explanations. For example, when they look back, all of a sudden we went from 13.8 billion years old to 27 billion years old at the drop of a hat because they saw something that shouldn't have been there.
Yes, I was shocked by that. There's a guy out there who is actually suggesting that they ought to double the age of the universe to solve this problem. And, if you can just... what really shocks me is how many people seem to be taking him seriously.
Absolutely.
I was shocked by that. I mentioned that, and I tried to be fair to the evolutionists. I said, well, most evolutionists probably aren't going to take this too seriously. I was shocked at how many people were taking it seriously. And if you can just double the age of the universe like that, that tells you that this is all very speculative, and that Christians should not be intimidated into accepting this idea of billions of years. I mean, if you can double the age of the universe at the drop of a hat like that, I mean, you can't take it seriously.
It's a rescuing device.
Yeah.
I mean, they have created it out of thin air to answer something that really contradicts all of their models. I mean, the billions of dollars that were spent on that telescope was made for one purpose. NASA tells you the purpose for it. And that was to be a time machine to look back at the beginning of the universe and to see proto-galaxies, the early light. They saw none of that. They saw fully formed galaxies. And what's crazy is creationists were actually making predictions at the same time. You can go out on the internet fully saying that what we're going to see is fully formed galaxies. It's not going to look old. And sure enough, the data came back and the scientific community was shocked. So they're coming up with other ways to cover it up.
Right. Well, I guess, like you said, just coming up with extra time, it's almost like Monopoly time. Not Monopoly money.
Monopoly
It's
Exactly what it is. Good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's just like, well, I mean, we can just throw another couple billion years there at the end.
13 billion, not just a couple billion.
But what's sad
13
about it
billion.
is
13
the
billion
publications, they take that, they run with it, and it's just like if you tell a lie enough times, eventually it becomes the truth.
Right.
And that's what they do. And in 5 years, it'll be in all of our textbooks in school, and that's what they'll be teaching.
Yeah.
It's the definition of absurdity.
Yeah. Wow.
By the way, it's an interesting study to see how the age of the universe has increased over time, how they've had to adjust it. That in and of itself is an interesting study.
Because it originally, like, when the Big Bang was first proposed, it wasn't as old as...
No. I think they were saying just like something on the order of maybe a few billion years or something.
Okay.
And then there was a problem because it looked like the Earth might be older than the universe. I mean, you have all these contradictions, so they had to be massaged. And now, to be fair to them, some of those early estimates weren't too reliable, so
Right.
you can't criticize them too much for that. But it's nevertheless an interesting study to see how that age has varied over time, how they've had to keep changing it over and over again.
Okay.
And sadly, Christians who adhere to the secular worldview in this are having to throw out verses out of the Bible. They're having to reinterpret the scriptures every time evolutionists come up with a new theory, because then they have to say, oh, well, then how does that fit into the Bible? Well, maybe it's poetry.
Right.
Maybe it's mythology. They are destroying the fabric of the Word of God. If we can't trust Genesis 1, how can we trust the Gospels at all? They're irrelevant, because everything that's in the first 11 chapters of Genesis explains all of it. Mm-hmm. It's perfect in harmony. The whole universe is in harmony with that. But then all of a sudden, Jesus is not the second Adam.
Because Adam didn't exist.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's whenever they come out with these radical revisions, everything we knew about evolution is wrong. Basically they're admitting that we should not have believed what they told us before, but this time we're supposed to believe them.
It's real this time, guys.
This
I promise.
This time is for real. It's like, it seems like Christians, unfortunately, we're kind of trusting. We're perhaps a little bit naive, and I think we need to wise up. Mm-hmm. And the saying, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." And I think we Christians have allowed them to fool us for far too long.
Too many times.
Well, so
yeah.
much is going on in science. There's observable science and there's historical science. Observable science is what we all know. We know how the aspirin was created. We know what they did to put it together. They took notes. They stayed up with it, and then eventually had the aspirin. Well, it's the same way with Thomas Edison and the light bulb. I mean, he says he tried 10,000 times and failed. The reality is he didn't keep any notes until he came up with the filament that he came up as the winning filament. Then he started keeping notes. It's 2,774 times that he failed before he had the winning. That's when he started keeping notes. Mm. We don't know what took place prior to that. Nobody knows what took place prior to that. So it's literally a guess as to what came up prior to that. Thomas Edison doesn't even know what he did prior to that because he didn't keep any notes. You think somebody knows what somebody did 6,000 years ago when God created? They don't know. All they know is what God told them. So you follow the evidence, and every bit of evidence coming from any new discovery is pointing towards something 6,000, 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
Every bit of evidence is. There's not any evidence that supports the other one that I can find. It's everything from, volcanic activity on other planets that are supposed to be dead, moons that are supposed to be frozen now, and they're not. And there's only one explanation for that, and that's more youth.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole proposition of evolution is a faith proposition. It's not science. It's not faith versus science. It's faith versus faith. I mean, when you're dealing with historical science, you're dealing with faith, right? Yeah. You're dealing with something that you can't test, taste, see, variety of our senses. So they want to say, oh, no, you have faith, but we have science. That's a religion in itself, right? So it's not true. It's not faith versus science. They have faith.
Because it's a narrative constructed on, the scaffolding of this Big Bang theory, evolution. billions of years, possibly 26 billion years. Yeah.
Well, and it's every single new piece of scaffolding they put on is something that is a theory that they've determined that has to be done to make sense for the theory before it. Dark matter and dark energy, that comes around because they weren't sure exactly about how some of the gravitational forces were working. We've never found dark matter. We've never seen dark matter. We've never found any of the particles of dark matter, yet we know it's there. Well, how do you know it's there? Well, because we see the force that's taking place, so it's got to be there. Well, Richard Dawkins calls faith in a God is a delusion. I'm like, you believe in dark matter, which you've never seen, you've never touched, you've never caught, you've been looking at it for the 90s. Which one's delusional? They're both just as delusional if you want to consider them both delusional. Their science is just as delusional as your belief that's what you think I believe about God.
Right. Absolutely. And we did another podcast.
Yes, that's right. And to be fair, I know there are some creation astronomers who are okay with dark matter.
Yeah.
I'm a little more skeptical, but yeah.
And we'll link to that podcast too. Yeah. We're hitting all the old hits. Okay. So let's talk Big Bang briefly. So we've discussed kind of how, just like from a philosophical standpoint, that the Big Bang is just it's a faith. There's not real science there. There are bits of real science, but as a whole, like, it's just a narrative that's being driven by this, I guess, a desire to not want to believe in a God. Yeah. But is space as we see it today, the universe, the planets, is it impossible from a Big Bang point of view? Is what we see actually not just, oh, well, like, it could fit if it was this old? Is it legitimately, like, impossible if we're considering the Big Bang? Is the universe an impossibility if the Big Bang is true, I guess is a better way to say that.
I will say this from this standpoint. Nothing's impossible when it comes to science if the narrative works out. For example, the 26 constants of the universe plus the initial conditions of the universe creates your 13.8 billion year universe. Yeah, if you know what the initial conditions of the universe are. So that requires me to make it up. If I have to make it up for that narrative to come true, but that also means I can give you the narrative for a 6,000 year universe. I can give you the narrative of a 15,000 year universe. I can give you any narrative, and you can make the science work out, because that's what the model's there to do. The model is created to make the science work out. So they've got this 14 billion year old universe. What do we need to have happen? The initial conditions. They create the initial conditions that makes that work out. So does the science work? It can.
And actually, the odds do not work in their favor at all on the Big Bang.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know this, but the Big Bang has not really had too many successful predictions. Maybe one. You could argue maybe the cosmic microwave background radiation. They predicted something like that. But so many times the Big Bang has been wrong, and then they went back and tweaked it to adjust it to what they later knew to be true. In fact, even one of the main evidences for the Big Bang, supposedly the fact that it correctly accounts for the amounts of hydrogen and helium in the universe, they got a knob. They got an adjustable knob that they can turn to make sure they get the right answer, and they do that. And
the model right there.
Yeah, the model, yes. Now, what's interesting, though, when you turn the knob to make it get the right amounts of hydrogen and helium, it's not clear that you're getting the total amount of total matter correct. So that's a whole other issue. And then that also gets into dark matter. It's like, it's just, there's so much wrong with the Big Bang. Scientifically, it's a very weak model, and I don't think anybody should be intimidated into accepting it.
Well, I'd like to say just something about odds, because I'm really big into the odds, the odds thing. Leslie Argyle, back in the 50s or the 60s, determined that the line of impossibility was a chance of 1 in 10 to the 50th power, which that sounds like a big deal, but that's what science went with for a while. And then, of course, we started learning all about, DNA and everything we were learning in space, and that quickly passed by 10 to 50th to the power. So they changed that to 1 in 10 to the 150th power, and that became the line of impossibility. Right? If you flip a coin 171 times in a row and get heads each time, the 172nd one 172nd one is past that line of impossibility. It's now past the 1 in 10 to the 150th power. This is something that secular scientists are determining are the lines of impossibility.
So in other words, they're giving themselves more wiggle room by changing the line of impossibility. Since they know these molecules had to have formed by chance.
That's right. That's what this exactly what
they have to change the line of impossibility.
Yeah, it's constantly
arbitrarily.
Yeah, that's right. It's constantly shifting. So right now we're at 1 in 10 to the 150th power. You've got the same secular scientist, Dr. Hebert may remember his name, I can't, but he's determined the odds of us being here today from a natural chain of events, from the very beginning to me standing here today, the odds of that happening naturally are 1 in 10 to the 40,000th power. That's so far past the line of impossibility. Anybody that wants to, theist, non-theist, I don't care. That's just silly to believe in something. You're not going to go and place a bet for who's going to win the Super Bowl with the odds of 1 in 10 to the 8th power, much less to that kind of thing. I mean, that's just silliness, but that's what they believe. Wow. I couldn't get any scientist on earth to bet their paycheck on something with that odds, but they're going to bet their life and their soul on it.
Yeah.
That's a hard line right there. Yeah. Okay. So for all intents and purposes, it is mathematically impossible for the Big Bang to create what we see today. But instead, we can learn about our Creator. We can give glory to Him. The universe gives glory to Him. And how do we learn about our Creator from looking at space? You hear people. Sometimes we'll get comments on YouTube and they'll be like, oh, why are you so concerned about space? You need to be worried about evangelism, right? And it's like, okay, yes, I get that to an extent, but we have been given this opportunity to study space and biology and all sorts of other fields. How can we learn about our Creator from astronomy?
Well, you asked two different questions there. One of them was how we learn about the Creator, and the other one was how do we bring that in to get people to spread the gospel? It was kind of, you worded it differently. That's basically what you were saying. And that's what we're doing at Day 4 is we're creating events that allow you to bring friends in and things like that. I mean, let's just face it. Space is kind of cool.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that you get, you kind of see the spacesuits alone, the way they're changing spacesuits because of the moon dust that, caused them to corrode, and now they're having to find out new spacesuits so they won't corrode as easily. I mean, all that stuff is just cool. And when you've got somebody that likes to look up and see the stars, they're just as in awe of the stars as we are. They just give it a different direction as to where it came from. But for us to spread the gospel, it's all about having relationships. I had a relationship with Lillian, which is why Lillian wanted to hear everything. So when we bring friends to our Star Watch parties and things like that, and they start looking up, they are naturally going to ask questions. And as they become your friend and you start having relationships with them, it's going to become easier and easier for us to literally spread the gospel and talk to them about that. And they will listen, because when they start seeing and hearing the absurdity of what they're actually being taught, you can't help but question it.
Yeah.
I mean, he did, and he was a geologist.
Yeah. I questioned it. But once my mind was changed, right, and when the Bible says to transform your mind, right, by the renewing. So when that happens, your brain thinks different. Millions and billions of years was not an option anymore. Mm-hmm. It's now seeking out what God has done and to confirm what He has said in His Word. And that's what the heavens do. And that's what Day 4, one of the things we do is when we have these star parties, we set up these telescopes and people come, they see us set these up and it draws people. And they obviously going to have questions like, what am I looking at? Oh, how far away that is, a variety of things. But every time it gives us an opportunity to inject the gospel message in it. I mean, we don't know who it's going to affect or not, right? But that is our purpose. Mm-hmm. That's one of the purposes of Day 4. We are a biblical astronomy organization, and we seek to save the lost through the tools of astronomy. Mm-hmm. But not only the lost, but really we focus on the heavens because they do give God glory. And we bring in homeschool groups. We bring in all these Christians that are they don't want to hear the secular view anymore because it's damaging many in the church, right? Many kids are leaving the faith because of the secular worldview that's infiltrated the church. So we give them a safe environment. They can bring their kids. They can learn about the created heavens without the dogma of evolution.
But I'll tell you the other thing that's it's very difficult and very intimidating to be someone that is up against 90% of the world in their beliefs, and for you to turn around with what you believe, which is only 10% are behind you, and you want to talk to them about something that's scientifically in their minds doesn't work. We want to give the confidence that somebody can go, I've got the backbone to stand up against you, even if I don't know, I'm not as educated and I will speak scientifically about some of the stuff we bring to them, like the odds. You don't have to be a scientist to know that the odds are way far past the point of impossibility. And when you're a friend and you've built a relationship with somebody like that, you're going to be able to talk to them like that, and they're going to listen to you. And we don't expect every single person to hang out and listen to that. Some people are going to laugh at you and move on. That's what they're going to do. But we want to give the confidence to everybody and the confidence in those scriptures that when they sit there and they talk to somebody, there's so many scriptures in there that have been scientifically proven, but yet everybody thinks the Bible's scientifically inaccurate that are not Christians.
Yeah. That's like, I was thinking as you were saying that, that's kind of edification of the church also. Give believers who know, that the secular worldview is not a valid worldview, give them the confidence to be able to back up their faith and what they believe. Any thoughts along that line, Dr. Hebert?
No, I mean, that's exactly the point. That's what we want to do. We want to give Christians ammunition. So that's why we've got Day 4. That's why we've got the Institute for Creation Research, as well as other creation ministries.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I have some odd questions for you guys. Okay,
we'll have odd answers.
Yes, we're kind of coming to the end of our podcast here, and so I manage a lot of the YouTube comments, and we get a lot of strange ones, and so there are those who, again, would kind of stand with us in regard to, God created us. We're made in God's image. He did it 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. But there are those who say that, space isn't real, at least not in the way that we think of it. There are those who say that, like, we've never been to the moon. We've never put man in orbit. We can't really know anything beyond Earth. What would you say to those people who are, believers and believers, creationists, et cetera? What would you say to them?
Well, I've never known anybody that believes in a flat Earth or anything. I've had actually people come out after our presentations and say they do know people that claim there's a flat Earth, and I almost can't even take them seriously. Yeah. I feel like you're following a cult or something, because how do you not look at any of the photographs that are taken from space? We're clearly not on a flat Earth.
Yeah. Well, and you can take photographs from Earth, right? Yeah. We have telescopes, we have technology. So that's, I had the same feelings. We had a gentleman come up to a group and ask some questions, really good questions, about how do we get the photographs of the Earth. And so I started talking about the International Space Station and things like that. And he said, so magic. So it's like you don't know how to respond because that's an absurd statement, right? But I understand, because he has doubts, right? He's doubting the government. He's doubting secular scientists. They don't want to believe anything that comes out. But we know Colonel Williams, right? ICR is a friend of Colonel Williams.
He's on our board.
Yeah. And he is the International Space Station. He's been on space shuttle missions. Okay, and then you have General Charlie Duke, who has walked the moon. Okay, so when I bring this up to people who doubt all of this, doubt the moon's even real, all this stuff, they will, in that they're Christians. This person says he's a Christian, believes in the Bible, kind of like what you said. These are, they have, that belief. But when I bring that up, they say, well, then they're not Christians because they're lying to you. I don't know how to answer that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you come across that and you have to answer those questions?
Well, not very often, but we've had some of that, and just the test, just like you said. You've got the testimony of Charlie Duke, Colonel Williams, the late Jim Irwin, who was also a Christian and an Apollo astronaut. There's another ministry out there that had this great little experiment about how you can show yourself that the earth is round. It was you could use airline flight times. It was ingenious because they publish the times it takes you to get from one city to another. So what you can do is you can take pieces of string and tape it, like get a globe, measure the length of the string going from one city to another, and that's proportional to the flight time, right? Well, the Flat Earth Society also has a map of the world, okay, where you can calculate what the flight distances ought to be. And when you actually do it, you find that the published flight times from the airlines are a lot better fit to a spherical Earth than a flat Earth.
Right.
Now, of course, you could say, well, it's all a conspiracy. Those published flight times are fake. At some point, what do you say? And by the way, let me just point this out. Some people would say, oh, creation is the same way. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because here we're talking about clear observational science. Again, when you're talking about evolution, you're talking about stuff in the unobservable past.
Right.
Okay, it's apples and oranges. A lot of people like to try to denigrate creationism and claim that it's akin to a belief in a flat Earth. But to me, it's not at all comparable.
So what you just said, we do get comments about
Yes,
that
we
too.
do,
And
yes.
then they're like, oh, a bunch of flat earthers. I'm going to just cut that clip into a YouTube short, and then I will just link to it whenever someone comments that.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, so yeah, the answer is sometimes it's hard because we did talk to Colonel Jeff Williams.
By the way,
he was on our podcast.
One other thing.
Yeah.
The article I mentioned where using the flight times, it was really clever. It's at Creation.com.
Creation.com?
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
where they had that article. And it was very clever.
Awesome.
And that's a way anybody could do it. You could verify for yourself.
I do think it's probably kind of like arguing politics as well. People either they argue from emotion or they argue from fact. And if you've got somebody that's arguing that kind of thing, they're arguing about something that's emotion.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much fact you feed them; they're just going to stay with the emotion. So I don't know. I'm like everybody else. I don't know how in the world you would argue with it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, so we've got a whole lot of we don't know about that because, again, it is one of those things where I guess because I'm in the internet sphere more, I'm talking to a lot of people online through YouTube, and our videos just seem to attract some of those contents.
By the way, in our store, we have a book by astronomer Danny Faulkner called Falling Flat.
Yeah.
Which addresses the flat Earth issue.
Okay, we'll link that.
Yeah.
Go to icr.org/store to purchase that. Well, awesome, guys. Thank y'all for talking to me and Dr. Hebert. Thank you for being here. Before we just wrap this up, do you have any closing thoughts to any budding astronomers, anyone who's just interested in this topic, and anything you just want to share?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to share the fact that I was not interested in astronomy at all when I first started. It was all about apologetics, and that's pretty much what I'm about now is apologetics. But the difference is when you start actually learning about space and about all the things that are going on, just because apologetics is part of it doesn't mean you don't all of a sudden have this glorious view of the space anymore in the universe. I mean, it's overwhelming what God has done in space. So even if you think you don't have an interest and you're listening to this and you don't think you really have that big of an interest, you come out here, we will get you friends. We will set you up socially from the standpoint of you will love hanging out with us. Sometimes we just cut a lot of jokes and we're not even talking space. We're just, having a good time and laughing, and which is why Parker doesn't want us in here with him many times because we embarrass him at times. but I mean, we just have a good time. Yeah. And you will be like me. You'll get out here and you'll first think, I'm not really that interested. And I promise you in about 3 visits, you'll think it's cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. No, I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Hebert?
Just one last thing. I think for most astronomers, and I bet you guys will agree with this, even the professional astronomers, I think the thing that got most of us interested was just the sheer beauty of what we were looking at. And it is beautiful. And the Lord Jesus Christ deserves the glory for all that
absolutely
beautiful handiwork that he's made.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you guys one last time. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for joining us for this episode of Creation.Live. We hope that this has been encouraging. We hope that you've learned some about space and how to interact with space and how to use it in evangelism. Make sure to check out Day 4 Astronomy. If you're here in the DFW area, you can come to one of their meetings at the ICR Discovery Center. We'll put a link in the description. And if you want to get these podcasts, Creation.Live, 2 weeks early, or our other podcast, the Creation Podcast, 1 week early, you can become a member here on YouTube or on Patreon. We also have some other perks depending on what level of membership you are. But thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time on Creation.Live. We want to say a huge thank you to our members and patrons. If you'd like to see your name here and unlock perks like early access to our podcasts, members-only polls and live streams, behind-the-scenes footage, or exclusive video content, links are in the description below.